Alright, good afternoon, y'all. Actually, it's the morning still. Just feels like the afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about Kahlil Gibran and Mary Haskell. A love story that should have ended in marriage. So, I did do a little bit of a template on this. I mean, with these more intellectual videos, I kind of have to put a little bit of stuff down on paper because there's a lot of details to this stuff, a lot of nuance to this stuff. But today we're talking about a story that I don't think is appreciated enough in our history, considering how influential the 1923 book The Prophet was, and his other works, of course, and his art. And I have been reading this book, The Beloved Prophet, which was a recollection, or which is a recollection of the love letters between Mary Haskell and Kahlil Gibran. And they never married, they were lifelong friends. And at the beginning of the book, it talks about how when Mary Haskell, nobody really knew about her during his life, but she came to his funeral and she was observed to be at peace and somewhat happy. And so she was this confidant, this extremely close friend of Gibran, and it's an interesting relationship because neither of them ever married. And Haskell herself said to Gibran, and you can read this in The Beloved Prophet, that all of the great men of her time, or of their time, have married. And not only that, but if you look at a book like Think and Grow Rich, which I am in love with, it is commonly cited that the great men generally marry, and often the wife in the case is a modest, self-denying wife. But anyways, with that being said, today we're going to talk about and kind of theorize about what might have happened if they had married, and how that might have happened, and what might have really prevented them from marrying. So, first of all, they meet, I believe, in 1904. At that time, I believe Gibran is 21, and Haskell is about 10 years older than him. And so they meet and they like each other, they become acquainted. And by 1908, Gibran has proposed to her and she has declined. And that is interesting because they were already so close, and Haskell herself says, again in The Beloved Prophet, that the reason she doesn't want to marry Gibran is because she doesn't want to take the place of the woman that will come in the future for him, And I've done my own analysis of this, and my overall conclusion is that at that point, Haskell observed that Gibran hadn't evolved to what she at that time thought of as his final form. There were certain aspects of his character that needed to be developed more. But the sad truth about Gibran's life, in my eyes, is that he never really overcame those difficulties. Now, I find it important to mention here that we do live in this universe of cosmic cycles and interesting, things, and I wouldn't exchange Gibran's life for anything. He was a sort of prophet of his time, and you could argue that the fatal flaws of his character that I'm going to dive into a little bit here were integral to his development as a writer and artist, and that maybe he wouldn't have produced a work like, The Prophet if he had married. Now, I'm not one that wants to change the past. I'm doing this as a thought experiment because when I started reading The Beloved Prophet, My Beloved Prophet, I just got this sense of, oh, okay, this is really interesting what happened to this guy and where he was at, and I just wanted to do a thought experiment as to what might have been, what could we think of? And I do this thought experiment not to say that he should have been different, but rather to bring to you, my thoughts on this topic so that you can bring that into your own life, so that if maybe you observe yourself having some of the characteristics that I'm going to put forward here, or not having some of those characteristics, that you can start to think about your life in a new perspective and bring in some of that positive energy, or start some transformation in whatever way you see as relevant. Okay, so let's get into the actual script. I've just been riffing. I think I've destroyed my actual script by this time, but she said no to the proposal. But it is clear that he gave up on it kind of after that moment. It seems to me, reading, that after that proposal, Gibran he's always in this fatalistic, he's always searching for perfection. And Haskell even says this in the book, talking about his sexual experiences and his absolute dedication to a certain purity in those interactions. And this, I think, robbed him of the privilege of enjoying, true romantic relationships. And I think, in some sense, that he was seeking a perfection that was impossible, and so therefore, he never felt good enough for a woman. And this is where I'm going to get into kind of the thesis of this video, being that his masculinity was kind of weak. He really struggled to, I think, express his authentic masculinity. And no doubt that his childhood played into this in a large degree. His father was a drunk, probably. He actually recounts a different story to Haskell within My Beloved Prophet, but all accounts seem to indicate that his father was a deadbeat drunk for the most part, and so he didn't have that figure growing up in life. And so I'm drawing this connection where he doesn't have his masculine presence as a child, and that is being carried into his adulthood and his expression. And I think that Haskell saw this, and she saw him as such a perfect man, but there were those couple elements that were missing that were keeping him from his perfection. And if you read the book, she does that. I don't have the quote here, but that's what she says, pretty much. So it pained her to see him in what plagued Gibran: ill health, unhappiness, loneliness. Those would be really ill health, loneliness. Those were the things. And it could also be said that his mind was evolved to such a point where he didn't feel comfortable around other people. He was so amazing that, connecting with other people was just, I guess, a struggle for him. And I think this is something that we can all kind of relate to, in a sense, even if we're not, anywhere near his level of sophistication on a spiritual level, because it's such an important skill to be able to express yourself in a coherent way or a fun way around other people, no matter what your personal beliefs are. And that's been a goal of mine for a very long time, because I've been quite aware of the fact that I think differently than most people for a long time. And so I've decided, I want to get along with people. I want to have good times with people, and I don't want to worry about, what's going on. And this is actually something that I didn't put in the script, but that just came to my head now. He was very involved in political considerations. In the book, it's mostly focused around Syria and Turkey, and there's a certain level of, anger and dissatisfaction and again, the perfectionism where the world should be that way, but it isn't. And so he's depressed or something like that, where there wasn't a level of acceptance, I guess. And I think that could play into it too, because learning acceptance is one, or forgiveness more specifically, possibly, is an ultimate skill. And when you can forgive yourself and forgive all the others around you, regardless of what their opinions are on a political situation, or what men and women are, or what things to inject into their body, these are powerful things. So, in addition there are these practical barriers to their relationship. Okay, so we've kind of overviewed the masculinity aspect, the lack of a father growing up, and this perfection that he's seeking, and that he does attain on a lot of levels. However, never putting it in a holistic, expression of it, of a fully realized or actualized individual. So there are two factors at play in Mary Haskell's mind. One, that she is too old, and two, that she isn't ready to marry yet. I would say that it is implied through this quote that Mary sensed something missing in Kahlil that he hadn't found peace with, and that he needed to find peace with that before he would be ready to marry. She didn't believe she was the girl for him. Did he believe she was the girl for him? Now, when we're talking about masculinity and femininity, we're talking about leadership in a sense. I view leadership as a masculine quality, regardless of whether you're a man or woman expressing it. And Haskell says in the book that she sees him as a great leader, a great spiritual leader, and he was. But he was almost a leader in the sense of a tragedy. He was a tragic leader, because he was an artist that never got to really enjoy the full fruits of his work, like a Van Gogh, despite his genius. And in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill talks about sex transmutation. And this is kind of weird because we wouldn't really describe Gibran as somebody who had mastered the art of sex transmutation necessarily, because he didn't really seem to understand, I guess, or he didn't have a desire to interact with women in that way, it almost seems. It's a very weird thing. But back to the topic of sex transmutation. Where was I going with that? Oh, fuck. I lost it. See, I shouldn't go on those tangents. I should just stay on the thought and keep rocking forward. Maybe it'll come back to me. Yes. Leadership. Okay. No, that's not it. But going back to leadership as a masculine quality, when the proposal was declined, it wasn't because she didn't want that. It was that he wasn't the man that he needed to be for her at that moment. And as time passed, the age gap got more, she got older, can no longer have kids, and this sort of tragic reality sets in that what could have been cannot happen anymore. And I almost think in some sense that experience is what pushed him away from women in a lot of ways. So that's a really a sad thing. Now, let's keep going. He really didn't seem to have a great self-image. His private writings reveal a man grappling with his own sense of worth and identity. So, despite the genius of Gibran, he always struggled with that identity. And in some sense, he viewed suffering as growth. And I've been grappling with this subject quite a bit, and I think we should all grapple with this subject because it is well known that the way to change a paradigm is through trauma or repetition. And so, we're trying to figure out, what's the right amount of trauma, or what's the right amount of suffering that's going to create the person we want to become. Because it's also integral to who we are as a person, and in some sense, it's almost like we have to decide when the suffering is going to stop. When are we going to stop learning and start doing, right? For me, that's what it's been like, because there's been a lot of points in my life where I could just go do, but I've chose to keep suffering, to be honest with you, and I've intuitively known that those periods in my life were periods of growth and thinking and understanding more about the universe, and that if I had discounted that and just went and did, maybe I wouldn't have the same understanding of life. But at the same time, the disconnection between your physical reality and extremely high spiritual ideals can create disharmony in the body. And I believe that is probably what was going on with Gibran overall, is that he was so focused on these higher spiritual ideals, and he was learning from the suffering that he was going through and putting it forward in books like this, but he wasn't able to start doing it. And I think he had all the knowledge available to him. He had all the understanding of how people worked and what was going on, but he couldn't bring it into himself to really embody an image of, for example, a healthy man with a really great wife. And we could talk about the spiritual ideas. We could also talk about the rejection of the proposal from Haskell and the eventual fading of that as a possibility. And so I think that theoretically, if Gibran could have, I guess, sacrificed some of his suffering, as weird as that sounds, and embodied a healthy masculine presence, perhaps he could have convinced Haskell to marry him, and they would have had a beautiful relationship. Because, excuse me, here's what I think about, is like, they were so deeply connected, and to me, it seems like fear was what held them back from being together. And fear's not a good thing. And so, when Haskell sensed that intense fear in Gibran, it pushed that away. You know, I don't think that it's healthy for men to have fear. You must become immune to fear and blind to failure. Become immune to fear and blind to failure. All right? If you do that, generally, I think the woman is going to, feel more comfortable around you. I don't know. So, I think that in a mystical sense, Gibran's life was perfectly imperfect. And I wouldn't want to change out anything there. I'm simply documenting this so people who follow his work and observe some of the same things that I have come to observe, so that they can understand more deeply why he was troubled, how he was troubled. All right? I truly believe that if Gibran were motivated to create health and stability in his life and a healthy masculine presence, as he no doubt would have been capable of, that's what I mean. He was capable of this. He chose not to. That he would have appeared worthy in the unconscious of Haskell and could have married her. While there is no telling what effect this would have had on his work, history generally does say that no man reaches his full potential without the modifying influence of a right woman. That was what I was going to talk about earlier. Okay. Sex is the ultimate driving force. Hill says that no force nor all other forces combined can equal the driving force of sex. And so, not only that, but there's all these mind stimulants, you know, and fear is one of the mind stimulants. And I think in some sense fear was a driving force, because the 10 mind stimulants are things that can raise the mind to a higher vibration of thought. And so 2 are negative: fear, drugs, and alcohol. Fear, you know, narcotics/alcohol in the book. And so what Napoleon Hill says, though, is that those that have relied on things like fear and narcotics and alcohol often rob themselves of the ability to enjoy the fruits of their creativity. All right? And so that's really what I think I'm getting at, is that Gibran was using these mind stimulants, such as fear. He wasn't a drug user, I don't think, as far as I know. Drank coffee. But he was using these stimulants, and maybe that is what really eroded his health and that. So if he could have switched his mind stimulant to that of sex or love, or, you know, the positive, one of the 8 positive ones, and we'll go through those really quick, you know, the emotion of sex, the emotion of love, the emotion of music, friendship, mutual suffering, mastermind, autosuggestion, and I missed one. I think it was right at the beginning. But one of those, you know, and then obviously the 2 last ones being fear, narcotics, and alcohol. So, while there's no telling what effect this would have had on his work, history generally does say that no man reaches his full potential without the modifying influence of the right woman. I think that in truth, his path was his path, and there's no sense in wanting to modify it. However, I would not advise any total adoption of his energy. If you're working on a spiritual level and you're doing things like alchemy, be careful interfacing with Gibran's energy, because it's not, it's intense, So that's that. To conclude, I want to leave you with some ideas as to how to interface with this. Perhaps you share some of Gibran's qualities, or perhaps you're his polar opposite. Either way, take the good, keep growing. God bless y'all. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll talk soon.